Hey, Alex, welcome to our Leaders Who Care series.
Thanks, Mark. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm super. We're able to have you, especially now since you're, such a big executive now, and everything. But
Couldn't be farther from the truth.
no, congratulations on the advancement and earning that advancement to president and CFO. And no, it's great stuff. Way to go.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that.
So, best way to start, obviously, is if we could have you just introduce yourself, a little bit about where you're from, family, maybe it's
Sure.
something you've never told anybody ever that you want to share now, something like that, and then we'll get into the business and stuff. How's that?
Sounds great. Sounds great. So I'm, as mentioned, Alex Coates, originally from the Northeast. So I'm a diehard New England sports fan. Family's all from there, and
Oh,
I
you
know.
told me that before.
Off to a bad start. And since relocated to the West Coast, and much to the family's chagrin, I am a full convert to the Southern California lifestyle. Have loved my time here in San Diego. My career journey started at McKinsey. I was there for quite some time, and loved my experience serving different customers, different clients who asked a young, inexperienced Alex and obviously a full team, but asked me to kind of research things that I didn't know about and break down complex topics into ways that were maybe more digestible. And as one of the best ways I think I could have ever started a career is to be challenged constantly every few months by completely new industries, completely new problems, and especially with an eye towards how new technologies were disrupting legacy businesses. And that technology itch brought me to investing. So I spent a few years in the Bay Area working for a technology-focused investment firm where I invested with a particular focus in technology disruption for transportation and logistics businesses. So distribution, automotive, and as someone who still drives the same car that I've driven for 15 years or so, maybe more like 12, I'm not passionate about cars. I'm not passionate about planes. I'm not that kind of guy. But I found this sector to be extremely interesting, and the reason for that is that it's a huge sector that impacts our lives on a day-to-day basis in ways that we don't appreciate, and to a very high degree, and is a sector that's about to and is currently in the midst of being completely overhauled by technology, both in the hardware, the types of cars we drive, the types of vehicles that move our goods, to the software that controls them and optimizes them. And that got me really excited when I was at this investment firm, and eventually made the decision to jump into the operating world, and have been in a few startups now before landing at Airspace, which is a platform that orchestrates highly critical shipments. So the most complicated, the areas where technology I feel has the most impact on optimizing these highly complicated supply chains. And I've been here for about 3 years, and am now the president and CFO.
You remind me of Robin Williams without the total comedy. Because Jay Leno used to say when he interviewed Robin, who was a genius, he said, "All I have to do is, hey, Robin, how's it going?" And then the rest is history. I got to think of new questions now.
There we go. Well, I'm happy to dive into any of those. Maybe to give you kind of a fun fact, something I've never told anybody. I did the running of the bulls about 6-7 years ago, which was amazing. The thing I never told anybody though is that came about this close from getting stomped on by a bull. Literally had someone pull me right out of the way while I was on the ground. I fell down and was on the ground. So that's something that I hope my mom doesn't watch this, because I promised her I would be safe when I went. And that was maybe a little bit closer than it should have been.
Holy cow, I almost feel like saying, and that's no bull, but that would be cool. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, those bulls are pretty strong, and they don't care.
No, it was straight out of the movies, inches from my head. Just so worked out well for me in the end. But definitely, Mom, if you're watching this, I apologize.
It could have worked out wrong in the end.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Very, very fair. Very fair.
Well, that might have been one of the best "you never knew what this before" type of things that we discovered. So thanks for sharing that. It seems like that between you studied strategy and economics, and you actually worked at the Senate, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I did. Spent a little while there before I started at McKinsey, but I probably should include that in my story. But yeah, very passionate about that. without going too, maybe putting my best Robin Williams hat on for a second, without going too far off script,
That's okay.
loved my time there and was very purposeful in why I wanted to go there, which is I had a passion for particularly employment issues. And so that was something I focused a lot on with Senator Reid, Senator Jack Reed from Rhode Island, the idea of constituent affairs specifically on employment. And I think that candidly, transportation logistics is something that we don't think about how many people it employs. 10 million people alone in the US are exposed to truck driving. You know, there are truck drivers in some way or another. It's this crazy number of people that are involved in the procurement of getting your goods from point A to point B. And it's something that I think the average person didn't think about 2 years ago, and now is very much in the zeitgeist of what's going on. How do my pears get from from Chile to China to America so I can get my can of pears that I get at the supermarket? It's not something I would have ever thought about, or most people ever think about, and now is very much. And I think how that impacts U.S. workers, how that impacts my food prices, and with inflation being a huge topic right now, are all intertwined with how technology reshapes that sector.
Yeah, without a doubt, we take for granted how things come, and we also, have lost. And it's coming back, and things we would work a lot in ag. Also, it's coming back where the value of growing things in your own town is so important for number one, money, saving money, costs, fresher food, having it immediately, community coming together, and so on and so forth. So you're right on the money. Ryder has been one of my clients for years, back, especially when I lived in Miami, where their headquarters are. And I remember when it was exciting that they announced that they are able to know where the truck is, never mind anything else.
Absolutely.
That's how old I am, by the way.
It's come a long way. It's awesome.
It has, and truck driving has almost been a little bit romanticized again, to some degree.
Absolutely.
And it's a tough road because you're away from your family a lot, and now there's a lot of couples doing trucks too.
Interesting. Yeah, that is and it can be a great job. I mean, the compensation is very competitive. It's something where you can, increasingly with technology, you can drive a lot of autonomy in your lifestyle. You can pick when and where and how you drive. And even a generation ago, that wasn't necessarily the case, where it was maybe a more regimented job where like you have a boss who has a boss who has a boss, and like this is the lane you get and you go every Tuesday. But with the advent of the gig economy, and that's now moved away, not away, but in addition to just kind of consumerized goods, it's moved into the B2B sector, and airspace is a perfect example of that. Our drivers make a great living, and they have complete autonomy over when they want to drive, where they want to drive. And I think that is making a job that historically was pretty onerous, and still is, a little bit more palatable because I have the freedom to choose.
Yeah, and I love the names they give their trucks sometimes too.
It was fascinating to see. So the business I was at before Aerospace, a company called Exos, which builds electric autonomous, to some degree, not fully autonomous, but has elements of autonomy in them, trucks for last mile delivery. And the two important things there that I saw, or three important things. One is there's a huge mission on driving down emissions. So that's kind of the obvious from an electric perspective. But the two parts that were interesting to me from a trucker perspective is, one, that what you're talking about right now, the ownership, both literal but also figurative, that many truck drivers feel when they get in their truck. This is their home. This is their second home. So to create a brand and and candidly a cabin experience that people connect with and have a good time with, and even the logo is something that they connect very much with. That was huge. But also kind of elements of autonomy and centralized leveraging technology to avoid issues is also huge. It's becoming a safer job as well, with lane keeping and awareness devices that prevent you from like you fall asleep, there's a beep 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 now that goes off in the cabin. So many of these aspects of technology are not the boogeyman that I think people took them to be, which is that they're going to replace jobs. We're finding that they're augmenting jobs, and that's something that gets me really excited. Harkening back to my time again in the Senate, where again, employment is a really important issue for me. And I think that this idea that autonomy was going to wipe out all these truck drivers' jobs we're starting to walk that back and understand that no, just like Microsoft Excel didn't wipe out the accountants. In fact, it made accounting a much better job. The
Yeah.
same is going to be true of autonomy. It's not going to wipe out the careers of all these truck drivers. In many ways, it's going to make that job more independent, safer, make more money because you get to go directly to the shipper. You don't have to worry about layers anymore. So there's a lot of things that will augment that job as well.
Yeah, and it's 100%. We do a lot of work in untapped talent. Everybody from people who've been incarcerated before to veterans, refugees, and now, and you remember, technology originally was supposed to make our lives better, which it has, but it was supposed to replace a lot of jobs. And
Yeah.
there's certain things, like you said, that should be replaced so we do better stuff. But it's opened up with technology. A lot of women can be truck drivers now too. They don't have to be, this just total strength of men, etc. And
Totally.
the whole stereotype that women can't drive big trucks, or women can't do this, or women can't do that type of thing. That's changed too. So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff, and I do love the ones that have their cots in the cabin.
Yeah,
with
sleeper cab.
It's
technology in many ways is the democratizer. It doesn't care for stereotypes. It finds who is willing to do the job the best way, and optimizes it for them. And so yeah, totally, it definitely opening that job up to more and more participants.
So I want to go back a little bit, because I like talking to people about their why. You've kind of touched on it, but and I assume your why comes somewhat also from even the volunteer missionary work you did in Mexico and whatnot. There's got to be some deepness there. Where did you seem to have a consistent thread of figuring out how to get anything from here to there. So when did you discover, let's call it the why?
Well, it's funny you asked that, because I think the whys in retrospect are so much more clear than the whys in your go forward decision making. So in retrospect, I can see so much. It's so obvious why I made the choice to jump from McKinsey to the private equity firm I joined, HGGC. But at the time, that was a really tough decision. I loved my time at McKinsey, and I had a few other options open to me, and it wasn't a simple, I've created this perfect algorithmic formula that dictates the future, and you plug in the parameters and it spits out, well, HGGC is the next one to go to. And I think that one of my key learnings, I actually joined McKinsey partly because I didn't have a why, and I felt that exposure to a dozen different companies over the span of a year or 2 years I would finally figure out the perfect job for me. After 2 years, I get to look at all these different companies, and that would spit out my why. And I think the biggest thing I learned from McKinsey is that from a career perspective, is that there isn't necessarily this elusive golden formula that can give you the perfect motivation and it's singular motivation, but rather that kind of what inspired me was solving complex problems in ways that were in areas that were being disrupted rapidly. So areas of rapid change. I wanted to solve really tough problems. I wanted to solve it in areas that mattered with a lot of change to them. And I wanted to do it in ways that affected people in a positive way. And so those were kind of very loose parameters, but guiding principles maybe is a better way of thinking about it, because there isn't a clean answer. You don't get to have this date and time where you say, when am I going to do when I grow up? Okay, I'm going to be, I'm going to do this, and that is definitively what I'm going to do. And maybe that's just a personal thing, but I think that is true for many people.
Yeah, I think the guidance counselors were overrated in school, telling you what, well, there's going to be engineering jobs, so you should be that. There's going to be
exactly
be that.
Find your core principles. Find the things, the underlying principles that matter to you, and the industry, the role. One of the best pieces of advice I got from a good friend was, when you join a company, pick the people, and pick the mission, but your role could not matter more. Successful people will find ways to have impact. Successful people will find ways to get the titles that they want eventually, but title when you join a company, your position is not something that matters. And that's something that's very different than, I thought when I first got into the workplace. It's like, okay, I'm an analyst. I need to go from analyst to associate in exactly 13 months. And if I haven't, I've failed, and that I found matters far less than I thought it would. And I think that contributes to my why. My why is I want to impact people. I want to be around people, and I want to have those core principles of being exciting, being in the midst of solving exciting problems in industries where there's a lot of change, and I can, my solutions to those problems can have outsized impact on the world around me.
Well, if this doesn't work out, you can probably join us.
There we go. I
Um,
appreciate that.
I hope the board didn't hear that.
It's a commitment. Taking that as a commitment.
You know, this series that we do is about leaders who care, which we trademarked because we found that the leaders who do care about making an impact and doing the right thing and whatnot usually do better in business, and they're the ones that usually are able to, we're able to represent them better to attract the best people. What I saw on your website, one of the things that turned me on was you talked about how our team cares.
Yeah.
On there, and if you could share with us a little bit about the vision of Nick and Ryan, the co-founders, and the continued forward-thinking leadership. Now you're president and CFO. I'm assuming getting paid double because of that. And
I wish. I might say that to my CEO. Let him know that.
But what about that vision? And included in that, I had a couple of questions. Your differentiation in getting everything from here to there.
Yeah. So the quick overview of Airspace is that we are a provider of what's called time-critical logistics services. So time-critical logistics, something I had never heard of, even though I'd been in logistics space for quite some time, as I mentioned. It's the part of the industry that ships stuff that's the most important, the most critical, where time is of the essence. When I get a package from my mom, I want it to arrive in a couple days, but if it's an hour early or an hour late, really doesn't matter. If I'm shipping an organ transplant, if I'm shipping a semiconductor, if I'm shipping a piece of critical inventory or a widget for a broken down manufacturing line, an hour matters a lot. For manufacturing customers, it can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. And for medical customers, for healthcare customers, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours can be the difference between life and death. In fact, on average, in organ transplants, probability of success changes by 2 to 4% for every hour that's in transit. So if we're able to, save an hour on an organ transplant, that's a 2 to 4% chance that person's going to survive. If it's 2, 3, 4 hours, you're talking about material improvement in survivability. And so our co-founders were operators in this industry. Nick, actually, our CEO, ran a business that made these ultra critical deliveries and was frustrated by the lack of technology. There wasn't any kind of visibility. We talked about when trucks first became visible. There wasn't visibility for these ultra critical shipments, and to coordinate them required a ton of effort. When an Uber driver pulls up in front of your house, all you have to do is walk out and hop in. When a driver for a time critical delivery comes, they have to go through the hospital. They have to pick the right organ. They have to make sure they're documenting everything so that the hospital on the other end knows what they're receiving. They have to make sure that they're protecting the privacy of both patients. They have to make sure that they get to the right part of the hospital. And that's really complicated. So all that's coordinated by hand today, all of that. Think of it like getting a cab in 2010. You call the cab company, say, I need a cab at 10 a.m. Well, they say, I can do that, I'm sure. They call around a little while, 30 minutes later, they say, yeah, I got one. So then it's 10 a.m., you're calling, you're saying, where's my cab driver? And the guy on the other end says, I sent Sally half an hour ago. She should be there. She's not. What are you wearing? Where are you exactly? And for you, that's a nuisance. That means you missed your flight. That's annoying. For our customers, as I mentioned, that's the difference between life and death. That's me being a little bit dramatic, but it's actually real in kind of many of the use cases that we see. So what Airspace is able to do to solve that is, at a very high level, we leverage a network like Uber to make sure that our drivers are dispatched instantly. You see where they are. We're able to collect data on those drivers and on those shipments and on airlines to understand the perfect route for that. And we're able to ensure that that route is optimized no matter what happens. You get a flat tire. Okay, now that means I need to go to this airport instead of that port. Delta has a delay in Chicago or in Atlanta. That means we're going to fly through Chicago with United. All these things constantly are changing. So when these ultra critical shipments that are going across the world need that level of precision, Airspace's technology can provide it. And that's very much what the providers were optimizing for. This speed, this transparency, and this resilience for these shipments that really matter the most. And that creates a culture here internally of of caring. I know that maybe sounds a little corny given the title of this, but it
No,
creates a culture of
it
caring.
doesn't. It sounds right on.
And a perfect example of this is, I wish I could turn my, if you look around the corner, there's a tracker. We're an operations team. Our operations team, think of them like air traffic controllers. You call in, they are world-class experts in figuring out how to get something from point A to point B. And they have the ability to monitor all those shipments in flight. They have the ability to see which ones are lagging behind and make sure that to press on those. And above them is a big tracker of performance, of speed, of a number of things. But as part of that tracker is a list of lives saved. It's a cumulative list, and it's every time we ship something where someone's life is on the line, that number goes up a little bit. And it's really fun to see how impactful that is to the team, and to see how much they care about it.
Well, to me, and that's not corny at all. In fact, when we trademarked the term "leaders who care," some people said, "Well, that's a little intimate." And we would joke around saying, "If you think that's bad, wait till we start using the word love. You're really." But imagine the faces. I can see why the team would be impacted if you hear the story about Joe and Jane, parents of Bill, the little kid who got an organ transplant. And
exactly.
I mean, how much more impactful? I mean, that totally impacts you.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's one reason that we picked the people that we picked to be part of the airspace mission, is people who are motivated by that. And I think that that's partly an explicit choice. We want to make sure that we're actively recruiting people like that. But partly it's just a function of, a very virtuous cycle. You go out of your way to find people who care about that. They go out of their way to find other people to join them. So you create this virtuous cycle of good people recruit other good people. And the times we do make mistakes and hire people that maybe we didn't filter out appropriately, they filter themselves out very quickly, because you have to care to be in a business like this. That has to be an important thing to you, because when you're surrounded by people who are that way, if you're not, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb. And that's definitely happened here as well, where we don't always nail the hiring. We don't always nail people who are kind of completely aligned with our vision. And I think we do a great job of building a culture that prevents those people from disrupting who we are.
And, well, great people, I compare a lot of things to sports. Great athletes want to go where the other athletes really want to win. And it's the same thing with people. We're to the point where people will deselect themselves because they can't handle it. And that's,
I don't want to be part of a team where people are being jerks to me. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And the really great people want that responsibility and accountability, because it's not a job. It becomes, if there is something, if you're making a difference, there is something you care about, then your quote unquote job is no longer a job. It's actually something you love to do. So, great for you in that regard. At Fifth Element, we work with clients to help them strategically align all their types of capital, financial, human capital, philanthropy, their marketing dollars, whatever, with some kind of impact, whether it's social, environmental, whatever it may be. And as we're talking leaders who care, and that's not corny, they understand that business does do better. You do attract the best talent by doing that, and it benefits all stakeholders and the community. So what's your perspective, talking about how you've built out this culture and whatnot, or what's your wise words you can offer on how leaders can create both economic and social impact at the same time?
I think the first thing is it's very difficult to fake. So, you've got to build a strong internal foundation first. You have to be someone who prioritizes that in your own life before you can go and seek that out and challenge others to do it. Because I think people are smart. People see that. People will call you on that. And I am a perfect example of someone who's failed in that in the past, where I've kind of challenged team members to really care about metrics that I didn't put enough focus and emphasis on, and that's something that people notice. And so I think challenge number one is make sure that your house is stable, make sure that your platform, your foundation is stable before you want to build upon it. Part two is figure out kind of what type of culture you want to have in your business, and that's not always the same. We talk about that like it's this universally positive thing to have this set of attributes. But I think different businesses require different attributes. Some businesses require people to be to challenge each other more. Some businesses require more kind of strict adherence to guidelines, and that doesn't mean that one group has people that care more or less than others. So figure out what the culture you want, and then make sure that you put in place parameters on the hiring side. That's the first thing, and on the operational side to protect those parameters. And I think once you've created a set of systems, a set of laws, that people will govern themselves based on those. People will attract others, like you mentioned, that will create that self-fulfilling prophecy, and people will police each other in a way that's positive. They'll call. We find that all the time. Like I get called out when I break the mantras that I purport to support. And so I think that's an important part, is that healthy pushback is, and you create that virtuous cycle, that positive self-fulfilling feedback loop. And that's, I think, probably my big advice is figure out yourself first, and then put in place the vision, and then put in place the kind of the practices that will enable that vision.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. And what I found are the most effective management and executive teams are the ones that build so much trust in what you're talking about, that you can talk openly about what's working, what's not working, what you did, what you didn't do, because you trust that the intent isn't to be mean. The intent is for the same goal, to get further forward. So you don't take it personally. You trust when someone is able to talk to you really straightforward.
Yeah.
And it works, rather than BSing around in a meeting, or waiting till the meeting's over to go tell the boss something you didn't want the other guy to hear, or any stuff like that, which really is can become super toxic. I remember a quick story about I don't know if you're a hockey fan, but Mark Messier was one of the top leaders in hockey, and there's leadership awards named after him. And he went up to one guy when he was with one of the pro teams, and he said, "We really want you on the team. We need you on the team to win the championship. But I need to know, are you in 150%? Because you will help us win a championship. But if you're not, that's cool. I just need to know now."
Yeah, I love that. Like, all cards on the table. We got to be aligned. And I think having candid conversations like that is important, because it shows who you are. It shows that your incentives and your mentality is aligned. I think that's a huge part of that. Absolutely.
Yeah, and the guy believes in the other guy. However, are you in, type of thing, So, really quick on something. There's been so much stuff going on. The last few years. That it's crazy. Pandemic and wildfires and racial justice, and Mother Nature's just totally pissed off and smacking us in the head, saying, "Wake up, you guys! What's going on?"
Absolutely.
Do you find there's been, for lack of a better word, an awakening for people as to what's really important?
It's funny. I don't know. I don't know that I have a strong answer on that. I do think that there are more platforms now, and we talk about the negative aspects of social media, which there are myriad, but there are also a lot of positive aspects, and that we've given a voice to people that didn't necessarily have a voice a generation ago. And so there's been an awakening in the sense that we can hear those. We can see that, we can hear those voices of people who are passionate about those topics in a way that we couldn't in prior generations as easily. And two is, we've seen, as you always do when you kind of new generations enter the workforce, enter adulthood, you've seen kind of millennial and Gen Zs are a much larger part of the popular voice. And so I think that their voices are being heard. They make up a larger portion than they did 5-10 years ago. And so I think that those are issues that have mattered to those groups for quite some time. And so that in that way, they're being heard more. And in a collective, from a collective perspective, it looks maybe like more of an awakening. But I think if you would really dig into it, it's more a function of those voices are louder, and there's more of them than there were even just a few years ago, which is something that's exciting. I mean, change is painful, but it's progress. And I think to see that happening, I don't know that there is as much of an awakening maybe as there should be or could be, but it certainly feels like we are in many ways headed in the right directions.
Yeah, we have short memories, but yeah, it's a brilliant thing you said about more voices being able to be heard that maybe would have never been heard before. Last quick question on this. In 2021, a client of mine said to me, he said, 2020 seems to me like it was the year that flew by slowly.
Yes, I love that.
It was crazy. It made you think. So now here we are, already going towards fourth quarter, almost to 2022, and it seems like 2020 was both yesterday and years ago at the same time. What are you most grateful for, and what are you most hopeful for?
Oh, wow. What am I grateful for? First thing, most grateful for, I'm assuming this is my my full life and not necessarily my professional life, but my immediate thing that comes to mind is family. I've got a 2-year-old and a little one on the way, and between the two of them and my awesome wife, I couldn't be happier enough and more grateful for that first and foremost. And I think that spawns a lot of other decision making. What's important to me, what I want to do next, is all often generated on that platform, on that being the most important thing in my life. And what am I most hopeful for? That's a great question. Probably a little tougher to answer, and maybe a little bit more on the spot. I don't know that I have a firm single thing that I'm hopeful for, but I am kind of harkening back to our comment before, excited that now more than ever, I have confidence in the ability of those around me to solve some of these complex problems. So is there any one solution that I see coming down the tracks that I'm thinking, okay, fusion is going to solve all of our energy problems? Maybe, I don't know, but there's not any one technology or wave or initiative or directive that I think is going to be a panacea for our problems. But I have never felt more optimistic about the ability of smart, passionate, excited, caring people to solve problems that they happen to be focused on. I never in a million years would have thought that I'd be the guy focused on time critical logistics. That's just not something I ever would have thought about. But people are able to find things that they didn't know they were passionate about, and have the tools now more so than ever to create outsized impact. That's one of the coolest things about being at a startup, by the way, is to see that it doesn't take big company X or big government X to solve big problem X. That two guys in a computer, two people in a computer can solve some of the most complicated problems in the world, and that's something that gets me really excited.
That is something to be excited about and hopeful for. And hey, listen, thanks so much for being a leader who cares, number one, and for sharing some of your insights. We're excited, and it's just fantastic stuff that you're doing, because it's life changing and business changing that impacts people too. So way to go, and we appreciate you being here. Awesome. Thanks so much for the opportunity, Mark. This was a great conversation, and I'm looking forward to connecting again soon and hearing how it goes. Sounds great to me. Thanks. Hey, Mark.